Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. Hare Krishna, everyone. This is episode 41 of Arise the Honest Man's podcast. I am Karuna Avatar Das. With me, my beloved co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu. And for the very first time, we have a highly esteemed guest on our show, Madhavananda Prabhu. I'll just give a brief introduction of Madhavananda Prabhu if anyone is not familiar with him. He is the chief editor of Gopal Publications, an historical researcher, a teacher, and he's been a pilgrimage guide for many decades. He's also the director of the Gaudiya Research Association, which is part of the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. And he truly has a wealth of knowledge and realization and articulates his perspectives in a very, very unique, beautiful way. And this, combined with his sense of grounding and his down-to-earth mood, makes him a truly beloved teacher in our devotional community. So we are deeply grateful to have Madhavananda Prabhu with us. And I'll perhaps just let Jai Jagannath Prabhu introduce this very interesting topic.
Just before I get to that, Madhavananda looks like he's come up twice in our thing. You see that there? I don't know what that's all about.
Should I just click on?
Okay, no, it's okay.
All right,
I've just removed it.
Yeah, so Madhavananda Prabhu, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. This is truly exciting. Just a little bit of a quick background how you ended up being on the show. On our episode about 2 or 3 episodes ago, we did an episode called "You're Condoning Sex," said sarcastically because we were getting a lot of criticism about some of the previous hosts that we had on. And when I posted the blurb for that particular episode, you made a comment on there that if you talk about I'm reading directly from your comment here on the Facebook post. You said, if you talk about the literary and archaeological artistic tradition of porn in the Gaudiya Vedic tradition, it might be politically incorrect, and then it got a lot of laughs. And I was like, yo, can we do that? And you were quite obliging, and you said, I can do it. It's an interesting topic. However, don't ask me to provide a slideshow. So that's how we're here right now. So yeah, that's kind of the start of this particular conversation. I don't know if you wanted to comment more on that, but that's how we got here right now. And we thought it would be a unique. I mean, I guess because when we think Vedic culture, especially Shuddha Bhakti Gaudiya Vedic culture, you think it's, although our highest idea has the amorous element to it, or the emotive element to it, it doesn't actually strike us as amorous because it's pure. So to hear the word porn and pure Gaudiya things like juxtaposed, it's like what? And I don't know. So if you want to comment on that as a sort of just a springboard into the conversation.
Yeah, I've been living in Puri in Orissa for 25 years.
Wow.
And I've been to the Konark Temple a number of times, and there's a lot of erotic sculptures on there. In fact, there's 2 girls, lesbian things going on, and so many different very, very graphic erotic sculptures. And I've also seen it's going on in Bhubaneswar, some of the ancient temples, on the Jagannath Mandir itself. I haven't been inside, but there's on the walls of the Jagannath Mandir on the outside, and also an Amarnath temple, and many, many temples in India. And it's been interesting to me. I remember coming across something by Jagannath Das.
I read that. Yeah, I read that article also.
Yeah, he wrote some interesting things about this. And there's also, I've come across one scholarly book by Devangana Desai, who wrote a book called Erotic Sculpture of India. And everybody basically has the same problem, or the same kind of question, how, we're used to Bhagavad Gita, Kamaistaishtar Hita Jnana,
right.
Anybody who's lusty, they have no brain. And it's, it's a very interesting thing to me. And I've contemplated this topic for a long time, and I think I've digested something of, at least I have a way to digest it. Let's put it that way. And I think you'll be interested in it. And I appreciate your blog here that you're doing. And I think perhaps one of your purposes is you want to try to stretch people's minds a little bit, broaden their minds a little bit.
Absolutely.
And this is a good subject for that. It's also a good topic too, because even for the most chaste and conservative amongst us, they'll probably come in touch with this subject sooner or later, or maybe someone may challenge them. You know, look, you people talk about celibacy, and I was just in Konark, and wow, it's pretty intense. And what gives? And can devotees have a good response to that? And I think they can. There are some interesting theories, as Jagannath points out in his paper, and those theories are okay. I can mention some of those as we go along. But anyway, that's kind of my inspiration for it. I like your mood of broadening people's minds, making them think a little bit. And to do that, sometimes we need to be a little bit shocked, because we have some certain standards. And I was just telling, for those who are watching, I was just telling the devotees here, Jai Jagannath Prabhu, and Prabhuji, what's your name again?
Karuna Avatar.
I'm sorry, I just got to introduce you. That's really terrible. Please forgive me.
No problem.
Karuna Avatar Prabhu and Jai Jagannath. I was just telling him that you know, gee, I hope I don't like get banned and beaten, tarred and feathered somewhere or something for this, because it's really a lot for devotees to digest. And as we were speaking with him before, I don't even want to get into details, because it's just too
far out.
It would be really shocking. It's serious stuff. But how do we digest it, and why was it there? That's our real purpose.
Right.
That I see.
Absolutely. Prabhu, thank you so much for leading into it so nicely in that way. I'm just interested to ask you on a slightly more personal level, just for anyone who's listening that aren't so familiar with you and your story. Would you like to maybe just tell us like a very concise but yet, you know, a solid kind of just timeline of your journey in Krishna consciousness and your devotional service? Just, you know, how did you, I mean, I guess it could be a whole story, but just kind of like just your general sort of journey through Krishna consciousness to where you are today.
Sure. In 1972, I was 12 years old. And we used to go into some abandoned houses like little boys like to do. And at that time, I was reading a lot of different, I liked reading about different mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and different religious traditions. My father was an artist, and we had kind of an eclectic, broad-minded community that I was living in. And I went into this abandoned house, and I saw these pictures on the wall, which now I know they're from Krishna book. And I remember just staring at them for hours, and I couldn't figure them out. And I thought, man, I thought I know the major mythologies in the world. And obviously this must be something about God. I could pick that up. But who's this blue boy and all these girls and cows? And and ironically, somehow, this is in 1972 in America, that was around that time I became a vegetarian. And I never liked meat. I didn't know any vegetarians. But I just didn't like it, and I just decided to do that around that time. And I think perhaps it was because of touching Srila Prabhupada's books. And then later in like 1978, I met the devotees at the Rainbow Gathering in Washington State. And then I would come across some different ways. I started reading some different books of Prabhupada, but I wasn't really impressed by them until one devotee, I was a street musician and traveling, and one devotee, we went to Tucson, Arizona. He gave me his book of teachings of Lord Caitanya. And he said, this book, this is the only copy I've got, and this book is really good for you. And I had Science of Self-Realization and Chant and Be Happy and Gita, and none of those books really touched me. But I started reading Teachings of Lord Caitanya, which is like supposed to be, it's Prabhupada's probably most philosophical thing. And I wasn't so philosophical, don't get me wrong, but it just blew my mind. And just the phrase devotional service. So it's a long story. I was living in a cave around that time, shortly after, in Mount Lemmon in Arizona, and trying to chant Hare Krishna. And it was pretty dry, trying to live by yourself in a cave. And so I decided I got to find the devotees. So I came down to Austin, Texas, which is the nearest place there, in Tucson, Arizona, excuse me.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No, it was in Austin. Yeah, it was in, what am I thinking? Tucson, Arizona, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I came down, I mentioned to somebody that I met on the street, yeah, you know, those Hare Krishnas are really cool people. And they said, wow, you just missed them. They were at the university. And I said, oh, man, I really. And he said, but don't, you know, there's a sitar concert going on tonight. So I liked music and especially Indian things. So I thought, yeah, I'll go to the sitar concert. And I went there and I saw they had a Festival of India going on. And they had these guys with shaved heads with baseball caps. And it was Charu Prabhu and Madhuha Prabhu and a few others. And they were undercover, but they had like exhibits on Bhagavad Gita and vegetarianism and Indian culture. And I walked up and said, I know who you guys are. You're Hare Krishnas. And they gave me a big plate of prasadam. And then Madhuha said, why don't you come and travel with us and do this festival? And I said, well, yeah, great. And so I got in the big truck with him and he started driving me to LA. And after we'd been driving for an hour, he said, yeah, wait till you shave your head. You're really going to like it. I had real long hair. I was a caveman. And, but I couldn't say no to that. It just wasn't very cool. And they dropped me off in the LA Bhakti program where I stayed for some years. And that's where I joined in LA. So and then later, that was kind of a birth for me, of course. But then later in 1993, I came to India with my Guru Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And that was another kind of thing for me because before that, I knew what American ISKCON was like and living in the temple and things. And I had to leave my family. But when I came to India, my Guru Maharaj, I felt in some ways that I was almost like leaving the American ISKCON that I knew because this is very, very different.
Right.
And so I've been living in India since 93. And I heard a lot from my Guru Maharaj and also from Fakir Mohan Prabhu. He passed away some years ago. He was a research scholar from Utkal University. And I just mentioned both of them because I feel like it was a great blessing for me from a sociological perspective as a Westerner coming to this very different culture to be able to live in India with teachers who grew up in this culture. My Guru Maharaj grew up in this, and Fakir Mohan grew up, and they were just natural. Whereas, which is the topic of our discussion today, perhaps, I find a lot of times with the Western devotees, pretty much everybody has bad habits. I'll even say something really, really heavy. My friend Burke Rutchford, who's a professor in Vermont of sociology, he did a survey and they found that something like 70% of the sannyasis in our movement were not following 4 regulator principles. Hare Krishna.
Shock value, Prabhu. Thanks. You're bringing it.
to paraphrase a statement we used to say in America, stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that for them, but I think it's just hard for all Westerners. And if you really study what Srila Prabhupada said to his sannyasis, he knew that kind of thing. And Prabhupada still wanted them to preach, and they're still great souls. That's my humble perspective. I'm not into the blame game and guilt, and which is my point. Because in American and Western culture, we're not coming from this culture. It's a new thing for us, and we have to prove ourselves. And so we have to be super, super pure, even though pretty much all of us have very bad samskars, very bad background and desires and things. Yeah. And so they hide that. They hide the fact that they're watching television. I'll tell you a short story, funny story. I was in one temple, better I don't say the name of the temple, one temple in North America. And one friend of mine was giving a Bhagavatam class, and it was a hellfire and brimstone class. And you could see all the grihastas were like shaking. And he was saying, television is Maya. You shouldn't watch TV. This is nonsense. And he finished the class and he asked for questions. He has a 5-year-old son. When he asked for questions, the 5-year-old boy stood up and he said, "But Pita, why do you watch television?"
Oh man, that's too good.
Oh,
And basically everybody's rolling on the ground and laughing. But this, to me, this little story epitomizes Western Vaishnavism a lot. Whereas I
Yeah.
see Vaishnavas here in India, I know Mahants who like to watch movies, or they like cricket or this, and they know it's not the best thing in the world. They know it's not the most advanced thing, but that's just where they're at, and they don't feel the necessity of hiding that.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
wow.
Jai was got inspired by this particular phrase that he discovered on this MMA thing that he was following, about like owning your journey. You know, just being really, really authentic about where you're actually at and where you're going. But this is really fascinating, Prabhu. I want to ask this question at this moment. Like, so you coming to India for the first time in 1993, and then being very fortunate to be under the shelter and tutelage of Fakir Mohan Prabhu, as well as your Guru Maharaj, Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj. At that time, like coming out of the Western world and having to enter into this culture of like real purity, what was your visceral experience of having to make that cultural shift? And did you feel, and you've been living in Jagannath Puri for 25 years or something, it's been a long time, do you feel like you've genuinely, as a coming from a Western background, like really settled into the sanctity and the purity of the culture that you find yourself surrounded by?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily say that the culture is all pure. I would say,
Right.
because there's a lot of heavy things. There's a lot of child molestation. There's a lot of bad stuff that goes on. But here in our neighborhood, and you can hear out the window, you don't hear any cars or anything. We're a little on the outskirts of Puri. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and every one of our neighbors, there's a few hundred people living around us. I think every one of them has a tulsi plant in front of their house. Most of them, you hear conch shells blowing. Sometimes you hear kirtan. Every Ekadasi, you hear Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours. There's a temple, 350-year-old temple of Radha Gopinath just nearby. Everybody, all the ladies do rangolis regularly. And everybody, most everybody has like a big pot in front of their house. Maybe two of them, they put water and vegetable scraps to feed the cows. And I just love these people. But you also sometimes smell non-vegetarian things, especially fish. And pretty much everybody has television. And there's one house I go by every night. There's about 10 of them, 15 of them playing cards. And I presume they're gambling or something. And they're really, really into it. And, you know, coming from my background where we're trained so much, there's so much stress, Prabhupada gave that you have to be pure. Purity is the force. And things that sometimes I find myself being a bit judgmental, and I see that and I think, oh my God, you know, what are these guys, man, they're doing, but they're Dambasis. Prabhupada said about the Vrindavan Dambasis, he said, you can't understand them, and better that you don't associate with them. I would say we're very popular in this area. I wouldn't say it, we are very popular. Everybody loves us. And all the kids, when they see us, they start jumping up and down, shouting Hare Krishna and Jai Jagannath. And we have Jagannath stickers. We give all of them, and we do kirtan regularly. We give prasadam to people, and we talk to them, and we love them. And my mood in speaking with them is not to save them or to give them the blessing of my great association, but just to be their friend. And I learn things from them, and maybe sometimes they learn things from me. And some of them I'm really not into associating with because, you know, they're smoking marijuana. There's people like that around here, and drinking and whatever. But still, they're also special in their way, but I keep a distance. And then other ones are just amazing. They're very, very clean, very, very pure, and they're really, really into this culture. A big difference that I find in the two cultures is that Prabhupada, I think, once said that the Indians are closer to Krishna, but they're facing the wrong direction. The Westerners are further away, but they're looking at that. And that's very much what it's like. I grew up in a Christian family in America, and the mood of the Christianity in our family very much reminds me of the mood of the Hindus here in Jagannath Puri. It's just something your family does, and you don't really think about it. It's just because my parents did it and my grandparents did it, and that's just the reason why. And we don't find that to be such a great association. Therefore, one of the purposes, to talk about our project for a second, of this Gaudiya Odia Research Association, I want to try to bring people together. It's not just about preserving books. It's not just about translating things, although that's what we do. But the crucial, the basic principle for me is I want to be able to connect with scholars in Orissa in West Bengal, and with pandas and mahants here and local people in a way that's out of the box, in a way that I'm not representing ISKCON or some religious institution, but I'm doing something. I love them. I love their culture. And 1 second. We've got books we're working on like this. This is Roy Ramananda Padavali. This is a collection of songs written by Roy Ramananda. It's awesome.
No way. When is it coming out?
That's one of our projects we're working on now, the BRC. And I can't say. And some Bengali books like Gambhiraya Sri Gauranga and Nilachala Braja Madhuri. These are written by Rasik Mohan Vidyabhushan, who was a friend of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's. And they're very Shastric and very, very Rasik and Puri oriented. So I love this culture. And
just give it a moment.
Oh no.
Jai, are you and I on the same page here?
We are. I think so.
Okay. I'm. Did you lose me for a minute?
We did. You're back.
Okay. I think that just pretend you're talking to someone in India. So we in one sense we do it better than them, but in another sense I want to be myself. And you were asking about this. Sometimes I feel like a man with no home. You know, I was born and raised in America, but when I go back to America, I don't fit in. And I'm never going to fit in here because I have the wrong color skin. I'm always going to be, I make jokes in America when we give a class and there's a lot of Indians. I tell them, I'm confused seeing all of you guys. I don't know. Am I a Deshi or a Bideshi? Deshi means a native and a Bideshi means a foreigner. And I'm kind of a Bideshi, you know, that's kind of the curse. I'll never, ever fit in this culture, even if I speak the language fluently, which I don't. I'll always be a foreigner, but that's okay. Let me be who I am. And I appreciate what Jai Jagannath Prabhu was researching before. It reminds me of some things from Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sandarbha. He speaks about two types of bhakti, sakaitava and akaitava, and with cheating and without cheating. And without cheating basically means you are who you are. And as Baladi Vidyabhushan calls that in the first chapter of the Gita, I'm trying to remember the Sanskrit phrase, it's the Yoga of Lamentation.
Vishad Yoga?
Vishad Yoga, thank you. And Bishad is two words together. Bish means poison, and Ad means to accept. So Bishad together means lamentation, but two words together means that I'm accepting the poison of my situation. And that's necessary for bhakti. But the problem is that we feel the necessity, social necessity, to put on a front. We're not being an honest man, right? We feel that necessity. It's a problem.
Prabhu, can you unpack this statement a little bit, like accepting the poison of our situation? How does one authentically show up to the world in due acceptance of the poison of our situation?
Well, the Yoga of Lamentation, there's different types of lamentation. One type of lamentation is you feel bad about yourself. You feel sorry. And somebody, maybe they beat their wife or they abuse children or something. And a lot of times they get into substance abuse because they can't live with who they are. They just can't face themselves. So they just start taking drugs and alcohol and whatever. And they beat their wife even more and their kids and whatever. And they just can't live with themselves. And that's a type of lamentation, self-pity. And then there's a kind of lamentation we see amongst the gopis, Braj and Radharani and Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who are crying in separation from Krishna. That's not our kind of crying that we're recommending. My Guru Maharaj called it Atma Krandana, or the crying of the soul. And that's our Bishad yoga, where we accept the bish, the poison meaning that it's a hard thing to accept, but I've done some really bad things. I've hurt people. I've betrayed my guru. I've betrayed my vows. I've done this and that. I'm really fallen. But as my Guru Maharaj also sometimes used to say, great statement, your only qualification is your disqualification. And that's when you own it. That's when you accept it. That's Bishad yoga. So I accept the poison of my situation. And it's poison because I don't want to talk about that. If I talk about that in public, I can't talk about it. If I talk about it in public, you guys wouldn't ask me to come online with you again. If I told you what I was really like, nobody would want to look at me. Nobody would want to talk to me. We're all, so many of us are living kind of a lie in that sense. My Guru Maharaj also commented on that, which I appreciate. He said, it's not that you should just go and tell everybody about the terrible things that you do, because if we do that, then also it's not beneficial for new people. Oh, in Jai Jagannath, he's doing this thing. I can also do it. You know, this person's doing it. I can also do that. He said we should do that with someone that we have implicit trust in. He said Krishna likes confessions, and Krishna accepts those confessions through Sri Guru, not just anybody who's going to just make a report online. You know, yeah, did you know what this guy's doing, man? This and this. It's a sad thing. It's a sad thing in our movement that I can think of 2 or 3 gurus in our line whose disciples found pornography on their computer. And that became a big disturbance. And even one of those persons was a grihasta. But that people made a big thing out about, and they had to step down from their position. I don't, you know, it's a controversial thing.
Yeah.
Guru is something that we each choose, somebody we have faith in. But as far as I'm concerned, I'll say something really controversial. Even if someone's watching pornography or something, as far as I'm concerned, he can still be a guru. If he's teaching you about the holy name, teaching you about the Bhagavatam, connecting you with the right things, and if he's honest, and if he's not trying to act like something that he's not. Now, probably a lot of people wouldn't want to take initiation from him there. And he's not advocating some bogus thing, of course.
I want to get to the other subject matter, but just on this point, it is obviously will be very controversial in our Sangha, but when I read Sri Krishna Bhajanamrita of Narahari Sarkar, it seems to have indication like if a guru, quote, falls down because of sensuality, he is still not to be rejected just on the fact that he's fallen down because of sensuality. So it's just like, I'm like, can we have that discussion a little bit? Because, I know I have friends whose gurus have fallen due to sensuality and they reject their gurus. They become quite, having animosity. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the guidance that we're given in terms of dealing with that sort of scenario. That's totally a really cool subject matter. But I want to use this as a segue point also to the idea that because of being Westerners and having the sort of erotic samskars that we have, as you can imagine, because we're like the internet culture. So we have some very ghastly erotic samskaras. And so when we come in contact with the erotic and this immaculate Vedic culture, especially after being trained to look at the erotic after joining ISKCON, especially as something like bad, negative, unfavorable, etc., to come in contact with the erotic and the immaculate Vedic culture, you can understand presents somewhat of a dilemma for us. So how are we supposed to navigate that? Like jumping into that subject matter a little bit.
Yeah. A few points. First of all, I just address your last point. I wouldn't necessarily say that all of this culture is immaculate. I would say the teachings are immaculate. I would say there are immaculate persons in it. But the thesis, the point that I want to conclude with, which I'll just throw in the beginning, I guess now, is that there's something for everyone. And there's some way through the process of association, and we'll get to that, to help uplift everyone. Your point about people being fallen from Narahari Sakar, it reminds me also of a statement Bhaktivinoda makes in Jaiva Dharma, which is a real shocker. There's a conversation between the guru and the disciple, and he's asking his Gurudev, he says, so what about someone who has left Vaishnav culture? They fell down, and they performed sinful activities, but now they're practicing again. Is that person a Vaishnav? Yes, that person's a Vaishnav. Well, what about a sannyasi who got married, but now he's practicing? If he's practicing as a devotee, he's a Vaishnav, and he should be respected, and he shouldn't be considered to be fallen. Someone's fallen who's not chanting Hare Krishna, who's not practicing Vaishnavism. And in one sense, my Guru Maharaj also commented once, he said, there's no question of you falling down because you're already in a fallen position. So if we accept our position, and that's one thing that I love. Tomorrow we're taking a group of devotees to Siddha Bakul, Haridas Thakur's Bhajan Kutir, and I try to look for lessons in each of these different tirthastalis. And one of the lessons that I offer there is that Haridas Thakur was real, and he never denied his background. He didn't say, he didn't try to deny that he came from a Muslim family who probably ate meat and did, so many terrible things. He always identified himself as Javana Haridas. But we don't do that. I come from from a worse background than him, and he's the Namacharya. And not only is he the Namacharya, he's Lord Brahma, right? Lord Brahma installed the deities in Jagannath Puri. He installed Jagannath, and now they won't let him in the temple. And he could go there and say, hey, don't you know who I am? Get out of my way. I'm Lord Brahma, I installed the deities. And not only that, Caitanya Mahaprabhu and I were like this, I'm the Namacharya. But he didn't do that. To teach us what it means to take shelter of Nam, he remembered his background. He didn't forget that. I pray that I never forget my parents. I pray that I never forget my background. I don't want to become such a proud person that and then now I can't tell you about my mother. I have a hard time telling you about the way I grew up as a teenager in America, because it's not very
wholesome.
It's going to impress people in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's deep. So let's get into this erotica and Vedic culture. How you want to introduce us to this? Or introduce our audience to this?
Yeah, probably most devotees are familiar with Khajuraho. At least we've heard the name Khajuraho, and we've heard of Konark, and there's all these erotic sculptures there. And how do you understand that? I came across this article by Jagannath, and I did some other research. I downloaded a nice book, very nice book, actually. I could recommend Devanganand Desai's Erotic Sculptures of India. It's a social cultural study. It's something he did for his PhD. It's very, or she did, excuse me, it's a lady. She writes it in a very, it's not erotic what she writes, but she tells you exactly what's going on. And she raises the same kind of questions that everybody else raises. What's going on? This is a culture which really promotes celibacy and purity and things. And here's all these erotic things. And she points out some really heavy things that it's not just, first of all, it's not just within Hinduism, but she says that all the important religious sects of the country.
I'll just give it a moment. All the important, what was that last thing? Religious sects.
Yeah, all the important religious sects.
All have some sort of depiction.
But the more she found, they're all over.
Sorry, we lost you for
Prabhu,
a second.
Yeah, we lost you when you said all the major religious sects.
Okay. So I'm reading from the Devangana Desai's book, Erotic Sculptures of India. She says all important religious sects of the country, Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain, have presented erotic motifs in their art. Sexual representation was a pan-Indian cultural feature, meaning all over India. It implies a common cultural substratum which influenced religious sects all over India. So the very first thing that we can comment, what I want to do, how do we deal with this? What does it mean to us? How do we digest this? The very first thing that I see when I start coming close to this is, wow, this is not a very uptight, super conservative culture.
Right.
Some of the motives, some of the sculptures are homosexual and lesbian sex and things, and even with animals, and very, very heavy things, which would disturb a lot of our listeners probably, because it's not the thing that we come to Krishna consciousness for, and it's not the thing we're taught to follow. So the first thing that I came to understand was this is a culture which is actually much, much more broad-minded than I'm used to thinking of it. And how do we put that in perspective with where we're coming from? I have a friend, Satyasena Prabhu, who was a disciple of Prabhupada. He was in Balboa Park in San Diego. There was a hippie gathering going on, and Prabhupada showed up and started giving a lecture. And all the hippies were just ignoring him and smoking marijuana and whatever. And there was one hippie in the back who started shouting something. Bhaktadas was there, my friend. And Prabhupada said, "What is he saying?" And Bhaktadas says, he's shouting, Srila Prabhupada, "We want sex. We want sex." He's telling that to Prabhupada. So what was Prabhupada's response to that? He completely shifted gears and started this real heavy, heavy talk about how sex is completely Maya and how it binds you to this material world, and all the heavy verses from the 5th canto and 3rd canto and and whatever. Prabhupada started quoting all those things. And it blew my friend Satyasena's mind that somebody could come before the hippies and speak like this. Oh my God. So he became a devotee. So that's the kind of background that we're used to, right? We're very, very conservative. In many ways, I honestly find, as I kind of intimated in the beginning, Western devotees, a lot of times, I find them more Hindu than the Hindus in some ways. They're more conservative than the conservative Hindus. And that's, if you study sociology of religion a little, my stepfather was a sociologist. It's a common symptom of conversion, religious conversion. You lose all your friends. You don't know the new religion. So to make new friends, you become a fanatic. And you're more hardcore than the regular hardcore people.
There's also kind of like a need to very fanatically and vehemently reject everything that you were into before, because what you were into before was probably pretty heavy. And so, but those are heavy temptations. So it's kind of like, unless you're like really like, you know, against it, then it's kind of, you know, so that psychological need also kind of shows up.
Yeah. Let me go on a little sideline here, which I think you'll find interesting. This is something I don't use a lot of names, but I've spoke with several of Srila Prabhupada's most intimate personal servants who did a lot of personal service for Prabhupada. And they told me that on a number of occasions, grihastas would come to Prabhupada and say, "Prabhupada, I can follow 3 regulated principles, but this 4th principle I just can't do." And Prabhupada would tell them, anyway, just do it with your wife. And that was privately spoken. And then sometimes there were also sannyasis. And I found even a recording of some devotees complaining about a sannyasi who was hitting on the men. He had some homosexual tendency. And interestingly to me, Prabhupada kept that person as a sannyasi. That's a whole nother topic, very interesting topic. And he was doing great service. And as far as I'm concerned, he's a great soul. He had some problems he's coming from, but he's chanting and practicing Krishna consciousness. Now, some years ago, I was at a program in the former Soviet Union, we'll just say that. And one senior Mataji started speaking to me about this fourth principle. And I told her what I'd heard from these servants of Srila Prabhupada. And immediately she became so upset. She said, well, why don't we tell people this then?
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. She's a very senior devotee. She's been around for 25, 30 years or something. And why don't we just tell people this? And I said, well, first of all, I do, just like I told you, privately. Prabhupada spoke that privately, but Prabhupada never did that publicly. And I'm only mentioning this in public now because it's becoming public knowledge. People are finding out about that. Right. It's not such a secret anymore. But then she said, well, why do we speak all this, celibacy kind of things and sex life only for the cause of procreation and that? And I said, well, first of all, I'm not going to change what Prabhupada gave. I draw the line there. Prabhupada gave a certain thing. He stressed that. I can't change that person. Someone else wants to do that. That's your business. Good luck with the society as a preacher. I'm not going to change what Prabhupada did. And as far as I'm concerned, I think Prabhupada knew, he knew very well that those devotees weren't able to do it. So then why did he tell them? And my personal feeling is that Prabhupada did that because he wanted them to cry. He wanted them to feel guilty and to cry and feel very, very fallen, and to help us come to a higher standard. And Karuna Avatar Prabhu, as you're saying, that we come from such a bad background. If Prabhupada would have said, well, anyway, that's okay. If he would have said that in Bhagavatam class or something, the next thing you know, we'd be having Kama Sutra classes in the temple or something. I mean...
Absolutely.
And actually, before we finish today, I want to talk about Kama Sutra.
Yeah, definitely. I have a question about that also. Anyway,
absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So you were saying that Prabhupada wanted us to cry. You were saying the reason Prabhupada gave that standard to us, knowing we couldn't follow, is because he wanted us to cry.
That's my personal perspective. He didn't say that, but I have faith in Prabhupada. And I see that's a benefit for me in that regard.
I like that as a reconciliation. So what are these different theories? You're mentioning that there are different theories. So someone comes, a Hare Krishna devotee who's new, whoever, they come to Konark or wherever, they see all these erotic sculptures depicting.
Okay, before we do that, let me just make a very short presentation of how all-pervading this eroticism is. It's not just in sculpture. It's not just in literature. It's in the Bhagavatam. It's in Prabhupada's books. It's in the Jagannath Rath Yatra. Let me give you a few quick examples. In 1996, here in Jagannath Puri, they banned a very ancient tradition. I don't know how ancient this tradition is, but the tradition is called Dahuka Geet. Or Duhuka Gat, Dak. Dak means to call out. We say Dak Nam is a phrase in Bengali. Dak Nam means like your pet name. Dak means to call out. So there's a long tradition in Puri of that. During the Rath Yatra, they had a particular servant called the Dahuka, and he would ride on top of the chariot, and he would be like right in the front, and they would sing extremely crude, very vulgar, erotic, as bad as you can possibly imagine, songs to excite the public, and it will whip everybody up in a frenzy. Then people would start pulling the carts and things. So in 1996, here in Jagannath Puri, they banned it because there were some modern day intellectuals who were saying this is dirty, it's not suitable to be spoken in front of small children and women, and this is really bad. This Dahuka Geet tradition is still going on in Orissa, though. All over Orissa. There's Rath Yatras that go on all over. So this is a question. I'm just lining up all of our questions, okay? This is a question. My God, this is at Rath Yatra. What in the world are they and I'll tell you, it's the most explicit, nasty kind of things you can imagine that they say. And then there's the sculptures in Konark. There's paintings in different places. Aside from all of that, we've also got Kama Sutra and different literatures. And aside from that, we've got Gaudiya literatures like Govinda Lilamrita and Gita Govinda, which are also transcendentally erotic, and we're warned not to go and not to read those things. Aside from all of that, let me read you something from Krishna book. This is from Prabhupada's Krishna book, chapter 48. To fulfill his promise, Krishna, along with Uddhava, went to the house of Kubja, who was very eager to get Krishna for the satisfaction of her lusty desires. When Krishna reached her house, he saw that it was completely decorated in a way to excite the lusty desires of a man. Prabhupada goes on. This suggests that there were many nude pictures, on top of which were canopies and flags embroidered with pearl necklaces, along with comfortable beds and cushioned chairs. Well, nude pictures means pornography, right? Right. And this is someone who's a great devotee. Don't think that Kubja is just some ordinary personality. She's a great soul, but she's got this pornography in her room. And Sridhar Swami, in his commentary, when he comments, this verse of Prabhupada's translating there comes from the second verse of the 48th chapter. And his in his commentary in the Sridhar Swami Bhavarta Deepika, he says that it included all these explicit sexual pictures. In Vishwanath, he adds that her paraphernalia included herbal aphrodisiacs and explicit pictures and things. This was what was going on. And Prabhupada's writing about this. So how do we deal with this? How do we see this? And this is a very, very confusing thing. It's not just confusing for devotees, it's confusing for scholars also. So before I dive into that and some of the different ideas that scholars and different people have for it, do you guys have any feedback you want to give me? No pictures. I'm not going to share anything, okay?
Yeah, I guess the confusion, that's coming up for me as I'm hearing you describe these things is that, like the puritanical, let's say, Christian world or Middle Eastern traditional world, the way that we receive Christian consciousness, at least in our ISKCON Sangha, is, not dissimilar from that. And it just created this terrible schism, like within us, which is like very real. It's very genuine. I'm getting letters on occasion bi-weekly from different people all over who are suffering from this terrible schism because they're dealing with this sort of erotic or amative aspect of themselves, which they're trying to suppress.
Jai Jagannath, hold on a second. The last thing I heard, I lost you. The last thing I heard was something about puritanical Christian tradition.
Yeah, so we in our ISKCON Sangha have also received, we can say, a puritanical approach towards Christian consciousness. And so the result of that has been a schism that's been created in our psyches that's pretty heavy, where the amative parts of ourself is to be suppressed, denied, rejected, looked down upon, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're giving all this other information, which is like, well, this is erotica is part of the culture. The culture was more broad-minded, accepting, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I don't feel resentful. I love your theory that Prabhupada wanted us to cry. That's like a very beautiful way of kind of reconciling this for me. But just in terms of experiences in the past, not only personally, but vicariously, I can understand why a person might feel resentful that I joined this Christian conscious movement in the pursuit of absolute beauty. And the result that I got was this terrible schism that ended up jacking up my life for 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I took sannyas and having not reconciled schism. And then it came up in the most horrible way. And now I'm shamed in my community. And I don't know that this is what's coming up for me, like on a visceral level. Like, why? I don't know. I don't want to say why, because I don't think it's a fair question, but it would have been nice to have, it's nice to have a concept that reconciles the two poles and creates a sort of a whole, instead of it being like this super dupe polarity where you have to be on one side of it, otherwise you're just falling or whatever it is, and then you end up feeling destroyed internally or having to struggle with that for several decades. I don't know if you have anything to say.
It's destroyed people's lives. Right. I can rant about this also. Let me tell you one or two of my favorite stories, which I think you'll find amusing, but they're true. I gave a class once in a former Russian country, better I don't say, and I was telling the grihastas that just as when you're in an ashram, you have to take care of your building. If you're a grihasta, you have to take care of your wife. Because you take care of the building, it helps your bhajan. You take care of your wife, it helps your bhajan. And so I told him every day you should say two things to your wife. I love you and you're beautiful. And I told him, because if you don't do that, someone else might. And then you're going to have problems. The poor brahmachari who was translating from his face was like bright red the whole time. It was hard for him. Anyway, we finished the class. We went outside. My wife speaks fluent Russian. And a young girl started speaking to my wife, and she was sobbing and crying. And I'm, oh my God, what's going on? And so afterwards, my wife told me the story. She said she'd gotten married a year before, and her husband took her on a honeymoon. And she's thinking, that's so nice. It's so romantic. We just got married. We go on a honeymoon. And then she found out that he planned on bringing his two brahmachari buddies on the honeymoon. And so they went somewhere in the mountains. And his brahmachari buddies told him, don't stay in the same room with her. She's Maya. And so he wouldn't sleep in the same room with her. And not only that, they told him, don't eat any food she cooks because you're going to get in Maya. And this poor girl was just sobbing. She's a very simple girl. She said, I just want to have a baby. That's why she got married. What's wrong with that? We're sick. And the problem is we come from a very bad position. And I think it's kind of this rubber band effect. We come from a very bad background. And to give that up, we have to go hardcore. We have to what's the phrase when someone gives up heroin or something? Cold turkey. We have to go cold turkey. We have to be really hardcore with that. Otherwise, we're just never going to give it up. But then oftentimes we get all these weird ideas, and I have a lot of other stories about it. One more story. It's sure. the worst. In one zone in Europe, we'll just say that much. If someone wanted to get married, good luck. They had to make a proposal to their guru and the local authorities, and they generally didn't want to let them do it because pretty much everybody was doing Sankirtan, which meant collection, big time in those days. And they felt when you get married, you're in Maya. So usually they wouldn't let you get married. If they would allow you to do that, then what they did with the couples, the first thing, they would put them in separate Sankirtan traveling parties and send them out so they didn't associate. Now, if you came back to your leader and said, look, I just want to have a baby. I just wanted to have a baby my whole life. I just want to have a child. It's pretty reasonable. And if they approved of that, they had a trailer, a little motor home, and they would give you like 15 minutes to do your work, your business. And while you were doing your business in there, trying to procreate a child, the brahmacharis and sannyasis were doing kirtan outside of the motor home.
I absolutely can't with this.
Now, I'll tell you a little historical comment. As far as I know, every one of those sannyasis later on got married.
Oh my God!
Probably all those brahmacharis. I can't imagine what they were thinking about during the kirtan. And the poor couple who was in the motorhome, and that's sick. That's not Vedic culture. That's bizarre. And this is a kind of weird things we take ourselves to. Now, if all of a sudden you hear from Madhavananda that, Konark, there's all these things, and the Dahuka guy, the Rathayatra, and this, you may think, well, God, what am I doing, man? I missed out, Better I'm just me and I'm just honest. But then I think we may overlook something very important. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have the topmost thing. And he saw our situation. He knew the medicine for us. Now, we should take that medicine, but we shouldn't twist it. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there's two types of persons, Bahir Mukjanas and Antar Mukjanas. or people who are external and people internal. The external people, they judge everyone, especially by how many hours they sleep, how much they eat, are they celibate, are they not? They judge everybody by external bodily things. And both of you have been in this movement a long time. So many of the devotees, that's how they judge devotees, if they're advanced or not, by how much they sleep, how celibate they are, this or that or the other. But we read about Prahlad Maharaj meeting the Python man. The guy was seriously overweight. He's eating like anything. And he just, he just said, well, I just eat whatever comes my way. Sometimes I fast. We hear about Garuda, who shockingly is a non-vegetarian Vaishnav. There's a lot of personalities. Sometimes Garuda would eat fish, and he would eat turtles and snakes and things like that. He wouldn't get initiated in our line, but he carries fish in him.
It's just,
I can't with this.
Prabhu, it's like I hear these things that happen in our movement, our, ISKCON society, and it just gives me the feeling like I want absolutely nothing to do with like such just insanity, like pure insanity, it's just completely no. Yeah, not what I signed up for,
Well, that's why you have the Honest Man's podcast, right?
Yep.
My humble, I think you guys checked out sometime. I also checked out. It's my own way. I can't live with, I can stay in a temple for a few days or something, give some classes or whatever. And I support, and I'm a team member. I'm a strong supporter of Prabhupada's mission, but in my way. We live on our own. We have 4 or 5 devotees here in our house. We have like a family, and we do things in our way, and we want to live like a family, like honest people, and simple and straightforward.
I'd say that I'm largely like that also, but I'm kind of interested in like the language I'm going to use is I'm interested in reconciling the poles, because I can't deny what I got from ISKCON and obviously what I received from Srila Prabhupada, and that's extremely important to me. I mean, I changed my entire life because of that. My entire life has been nourished because of that Sangha also. So I can't reject it in my heart, and I never would even want to reject such a thing in my heart. At the same time, when you hear like these crazy things, it does present a dilemma. So I'm interested in reconciliation of the poles, like how does a person navigate that so they come out whole and not broken?
Well, I know also Karuna Avatar was asking something like this too.
Right.
It requires maturity. Part of the problem, I think, is that I was a Bhakta leader in LA for some time, we'll put it this way. And sometimes someone would join the temple and they had really long hair and they had these old Levi's jeans, and their identity was their pants. Their identity was their hair. And when I'd shave their head, they get this weird look on their face like, who am I? Because that was their whole identity. And I remember when I joined the Bhakta program, I don't know how to tie a dhoti. I don't know the words to the songs in the morning. I'm not cool. I'm not accepted here. So I have to try extra hard to be accepted. So I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What was your point?
Like reconciling the poles, like where do we find the kind of like the middle ground?
And you were talking about we need to become mature. Maturity.
Right. So that requires some maturity. So we don't have an identity. So all of a sudden we pull a bag off the rack, we give it to the new bhakta, and we say, this is your identity. You are a Hare Krishna devotee. You are a new bhakta. You are Bhakta Bob in LA. You're an LA devotee, and probably you're going to take initiation from this devotee, at least in the Zonal Acharya days. We spoke like that. And we would give them an identity. And it worked. It really helped, because people are always looking for an identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they identified with the institution. That's me.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily bhakti.
Yeah.
So that requires maturity.
Prabhu, my Guru Maharaj was on the show last week, Mahatma Prabhu, and we were having quite a lively discussion in this kind of general realm. And this phenomenon that so many people come to the Krishna consciousness movement with no like genuine sense of like concretized identity, and that they're almost like looking for a sense of identity, and that they can, like, it's kind of like what makes perhaps the society so attractive to a large extent is that the identity that can be adopted or that can be given is like so rigid and defined, and for a lot of people, I guess that is a sense of relief. But something which is also, which I've also noticed and picked up on, is that we all like just need to experience a sense of belonging. We need to feel like we're a part of something. And my realization recently was that actually, if you look at human psychology in general, people will sign up to anything. Like, what we belong to isn't actually that important. It's just that we experience a sense of belonging. That's kind of what people are looking for. So now it's also just coming to this point of, and I want to bring this question to you as well, kind of put it out there last week, is that people come, and then in order to experience a full sense of belonging in our Krishna consciousness society, it's required to take initiation and to make these vows of, you could say, considering where we come from and considering the fact that these are Brahminical standards, and just considering a whole lot of struggles in the world as it is today, we have to make these vows to maintain extreme, you could argue, extreme standards of purity. And unless you make these vows, you cannot actually have a full sense of identity and a full sense of belonging in our society, in our ISKCON society. And you don't really have status unless you make these vows. And so I feel like for a lot of people, their motivation to make the vows aren't necessarily genuinely Krishna conscious. I genuinely want to have love of God, but rather like I need to feel a sense of belonging. And that is a highly problematic thing. Now, that's kind of an in to the question of like, can it be a part of an authentic identity as a bhakta, as a person in Krishna consciousness, to not necessarily be able to follow the standards of purity to the T as they are defined given to us by Srila Prabhupada? Can one be an authentic bhakta? Can you be a bhakta and have a sex life? Can you be a bhakta and not be able to let go of perhaps certain forms of intoxication? Is it actually possible?
For a long time, it hasn't been. And that's what we've been talking about socially. Right. And as a society, as we progress and become more mature as a society, I'm not speaking about as individuals now, but as a society, we'll come to accept that. We'll come to, as Prabhupada, in some of his Vanashram walks in the morning, he said that we'll have, Vanashram means we'll have some people in the community who are not vegetarian. And even sometimes he said they may eat cow flesh. Not that they'll kill the cow, but if a cow dies a natural death, you give the person the flesh. And maybe they drink alcohol and whatever, but they can still be a member, which to me means something of a Vaishnav. Now, I say something of a Vaishnav because there's many definitions of what is a Vaishnav. And Prabhupada ultimately wanted us to be pure Vaishnavas, which is a very, very high thing. But there's something for everyone. And really, that's the conclusion I have with all this erotic things. Should I throw at you guys some of the different?
Yeah, let's hear that.
Yes.
I have that circled right here. I'm going to hear those theories and then hear your sort of reconciliation. Okay,
I've some of these. You may have read Jagannath's article more recently than me. It's been a long time since I read that, but he researched this very nicely. He's a brilliant scholar. And some of the comments that he made, I remember reading it and kind of thinking to myself, subtly thinking to myself, it just didn't digest real well. Like one of the reasons was that Indra, that they put these erotic things on there because to protect the temples from lightning bolts.
Yeah,
that's some ideas some scholars have.
yeah.
Because Indra, he's really a lusty guy, and he's not going to want to. This doesn't really make sense to me. And a lot of the temples don't have erotic things on them. That just doesn't make sense. Another story is that it's for sex education.
Okay.
That's also, it doesn't, if you go and look at the carvings and things that are there, yeah, I guess it's some kind of education like that. Oh, and I forgot another category that I came across also. And that's, I do a lot of work with Patachitra art. And I remember here's a book we made, Mathura Meets Vrindavan, and it's full of Patachitra art, traditional Odishan style art.
Love that.
And I would go to Ragurajpur, which is a village of artists, and some other different small villages, and speak to these artists. And I remember the shock that I had once. There was like a 12-year-old, maybe 14-year-old girl who was working on some picture or something. And, oh, what are you working on? I went to look, and it's some sexual positions. It wasn't just nudity, but it was sexual positions. And that's a common thing in Patachitra art. And even they have like the 10 avatars, the 10 different incarnations. And Krishna, wait 1 second. It'll be 1 second.
I love the excitement to share these like books with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a Patachitra picture. This is engraved. They have something called a lekana, which is like an iron pen, and they take these palm leaves and they carve in them. Now, these are just a bunch of trees, but some of them will have the 10 avatars, and you see like the circle, and the circle opens up.
Prabhu, can you bring it a little bit more center screen?
Yeah.
It's a little bit out of the screen. Oh, wow. Okay. Now we can see nicely.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
This is gorgeous. I love this one. And let me show you again. So there's this circle right here, this tree. And maybe they have Balaram or Vamanadev or Nrsingadev or something. And then it kind of lifts up. And you lift it up, and underneath there's some sexual position. And I remember it was quite a shock for me. This young, very pure looking 12, 14-year-old girl doing that thing. And I my face like went red, and I just, I was very embarrassed to be around this young girl. And I was shocked. There's this young girl, and she's making all these sexual positions like that. And looks just very pure and simple. And she's also making all these pictures of Krishna and Radharani and the gopis and everything. And that's another one. Okay, so now let's go to some of the thoughts that people have about them. One is Indra, to deter him from throwing thunderbolts. Another, people say it's for sex education. Another interesting theory about Konark, I see it as more of an observation with Konark. Konark, when you go to the main temple, there's like 4 different levels, 3-4 different levels of sculptures. And on the lowest level are animals. And then the level above that are erotic poses. And there's the ladies with ladies and so many different erotic postures and things. Interestingly, there's a giraffe in one of those pictures. So there was some connection with Africa at one point. And there's a hippo in another one. Anyway, and then above that, so that you have animals, then you have erotic pictures, and then above them you have the demigods. So some people suggested, and it seems pretty reasonable to me, this particular thought, that they're showing different levels of consciousness at the temple. Another theory which some people have suggested is that they put those things on the outside of the temple to keep the lusty people out. Because when they go to the temple, oh my God, they just stand outside just staring and checking it all out. Or maybe even they go inside, but their mind is on the outside. Right? And so to protect the sanctity of the temple. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, go ahead.
I just like at this juncture, I'm just kind of fascinated to get like really specific about what we find in our tradition. For instance, if we think about like the Govinda Lilamrita, and we think about the way that the the Ras Leela is described in our more esoteric um, scriptures, where it's very graphic, and kind of like, because there's this Ras Leela phobia in our sort of like general society. Oh no, your consciousness isn't completely free. You're not completely free of lust, and therefore you should just remain completely aloof from hearing about like the intricacies of Madhurya Leela. But then there's also another perspective which says that that is the very means by which we get um, purified. So just like, what is your stance on this, Prabhu? And what do you see the purpose of these like very detailed descriptions of the gopis' thin waists and raised breasts and whatever? Like, what is why do we need to have that image in our mind?
Yeah, it disturbs a lot of young devotees. I remember when I was a bhakti leader in LA, we used to take the devotees out in Harinam, and I remember some of the bhaktas started crying, "I don't want to go to Venice Beach. Please don't take us to Venice Beach." Because the way the girls would dress there, and these poor guys, they just couldn't deal with it. And part of it, I think, is just that we're trying to be celibate. I'm trying to be celibate. I'm being celibate. I'm being celibate. I'm being celibate. And we're focusing on that thing rather than on Krishna. We're focusing on the negative thing. And we become obsessed with that. And then all kinds of strange behavior comes. So first of all, Bhaktivinoda, I don't know if I can remember his comment. I think it's in Chaitanya 6 Amrita. He says something like, Bada Jiva Shravana Adhikar Nahi, that for a conditioned soul doesn't have the anada and anadikar. He doesn't have the qualification to hear these topics. Jiva Goswami in, I think it's Priti Sandarbha, he says that if there's a transformation in your lower bodily parts, that means you shouldn't be reading this stuff. Okay, but then there's also the statement in the 33rd chapter of the Bhagavatam, which it comes after the Ras Leela, and Shukadev Goswami, he's looking around and he's thinking, Maharaj Parikshit is looking around and thinking, my God, there's a whole bunch of really conservative rishis here. They're going to freak out that Shukadev Goswami is speaking about Krishna dancing with all these young girls and doing all these things with them. So isn't this wrong? He asks him something like that. And then Shukadev Goswami speaks a famous Vikriditam Bhajavadu Biridam Cha Vishno verse, where he says at Shradanvito that if you have faith, if you're hearing from someone that you have faith in, then what'll happen, Bhaktim Param, you're going to get Bhakti, but not just Bhakti, but Param Bhakti. You're going to get the topmost Bhakti. Bhagavat Pratilabhya Kaman Hridrogam. You're going to conquer over the disease of the heart by hearing this topic. But it's not just by hearing the topic. It's by hearing the topic from someone that we have faith in a personal relationship. It's not just picking up the book or watching a video of the Ras Leela or something. We have our different types of media. And as Jai Jagannath was pointing out correctly, we're addicted to this kind of media before. It's not just that we can put this topics on the media and we're going to become purified. This quality, Shradanvito, has to be there. I have to have some faith in that person. And quite honestly, how much faith do we all have in that personality? That's a real question. And that's really for the guru to decide also. He'll see where that disciple's at and what they need. And maybe he'll tell them, look, you should just get married. So there is some benefit. There is some purpose for it. By hearing these topics, we're naturally going to understand that these lusty affairs, they're not meant for me. They're meant for Krishna. They're meant for Krishna's pleasure and Krishna's enjoyment. But if I haven't come to the point of having faith that really everything is meant for Krishna's pleasure, If I don't have that kind of faith, and I don't have faith in a person I'm hearing from, and then I start reading those things, then it's just like, people are going to go back to their old bad habits.
Mm.
I'm going to be really honest about this and say that I feel like coming to a point of genuinely having that faith at the core of your heart, that everything is meant for Krishna's enjoyment, and that eternally I am not meant for any sort of like erotic enjoyment. I personally feel that I'm so far away from that, so far. I can't imagine feeling that way. Like,
it's not an intellectual adjustment.
Mm.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm gonna be also super honest and say that in all the times that I've heard descriptions of Ras Leela and heard these very graphic descriptions of the gopis' beauty and whatever, I actually cannot remember a single time that I have felt some kind of disturbance below the belt. It was more kind of just like a genuine. It was just like a fascination, a sense of absorption that I experienced in that. But then it's kind of difficult for me to reconcile like not being necessarily directly sexually agitated by hearing those things, but at the same time feeling like I'm genuinely envious of Krishna for all of his like eternal sexual erotic enjoyment that I cannot like have for myself. I'm genuinely envious of that. I'll just admit that super freely. So I didn't really know how to reconcile it for myself. It's difficult.
Prabhupada also mentions that in the spiritual world there's husbands and wives, and it seems that they are also doing their business there, something. But everything is for Krishna. And the problem that I think is that we're not mature enough. The comment both of you were making earlier. And that maturity, what is that maturity? That maturity comes when we understand that it's really Krishna's in charge. Everything is for Krishna's pleasure. And it's not such a simple thing to say that. Another thing that comes to my mind too is that we're naturally attracted to beauty.
Mm.
Even you read in Krishna book, I think it's in chapter 6, Prabhupada says a very interesting thing, that when Putana entered into Vrindavan, all the residents of Vrindavan, especially the men, were attracted by her beauty.
Mm.
Now, isn't that interesting? That's not what I was told. That's not the kind of stuff they told me when I joined. I heard the Bridge Basis, they're all just like hardcore celibates. They never look at any women or anything, but they're attracted to the beauty of Putana. Now, Prabhupada doesn't explain that. I looked in the commentaries. I didn't find that exact kind of point. But what it says to me is that there's nothing wrong with a woman being beautiful. And men should get over that. Rather, that's her asset. And a real man can appreciate that. And the other point that I see in that particular pastime is that they weren't lusty. It doesn't say they were, wanting to grab her and drag her behind the building or something, Hare Krishna. But they just appreciated her beauty.
Which means which is to imply that there's nothing wrong with their attraction also. Not only is there nothing wrong with her being beautiful, but there's nothing wrong with their being attracted to that beauty.
Yeah. But we can't get our head around that.
Like, no, I don't agree to that.
Prabhu, you were mentioning a little bit earlier that you wanted to say something on the Kama Sutra, and I'd like you to bring up whatever you wanted to say, but I also wanted to just kind of prefix it with the following question, which is, for devotees that are, let's say, going to be real about where they're at sexually, right? And where they're simply not ready to follow 50 rounds for procreation, and within the context of committed relationships to have an active sex life. do you think, because basically we come from a what we call a pornified culture, where, you know, the young generation is so like indoctrinated by pornographic scripts of what sex is, and that's really something that is very polluting. So do you feel for devotees, you know, that are trying to take the next progressive step, that there is a place for, you know, following the injunctions of the Kama Sutra and like looking at the injunctions of the tantric traditions and whatever? Do you feel there's a place for that?
There's 100% sure a place for some people.
Mm.
I would say that it's not for persons who are really very serious about bhakti or more advanced. But we love everybody, and everybody should have a chance. Let me say a little bit about Kama Sutra. First of all, we say that there's Kama, Artha, Moksha. Karma, Artha, what is it? Karma, Artha?
Yeah, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha.
Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Okay, I'm sorry. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. My brain's not working real good today. I gave a class a few hours ago.
No.
Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So there's one commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that there's different literatures. There's Dharma Shastras,
Right.
Dharma, there's Artha Shastras, there's Mukti Shastras, and there's also Kama Shastras. And they're Shastra. So the most popular book, I collect books. That, you know, some people collect rocks. I'm into collecting books, and I've been to so many bookstores. And whenever I go to bookstores, especially in the West or in India, even the number one book of India is the Kama Sutra, more than Bhagavad Gita. I'm sorry, Kama Sutra is the number one book.
Sure.
But what do the people understand about Kama Sutra? It's written by Vatsyayana Muni. And a lot of people don't understand. Vatsyayana Muni was a lifelong brahmachari. That's the first point. And he wrote Kama Sutra to encourage sense control, not sex pleasure. He wrote Kama Sutra to help people understand how to find a good wife. And there's a lot of exciting things in there, different sexual postures and whatever, which attracts a certain category of people. And I want to come to that in a minute. This is a concept that I call the proximity factor. And we'll get to that. This is my personal conclusion about all this. But in Kama Sutra, in the seventh section, the second chapter, text 57 and 58, he says, Tad eta brahmacharjena. Parena cha samadhina vihitam lokayatrayi na ragarto sasamvidi. He says that this Kama Sutra, Tadita Brahmacharjina, he said, I've done this while I'm observing Brahmacharya. Parena cha samadhina. Well, I was in samadhi, in trance, and I did this vihitam lokayatrayi. I did it to teach proper human conduct, not na ragarto sasamvidi, not to teach attachment to sex. This is a shloka, Sanskrit shloka from the Kama Sutra. In the next verse, he says, Rakshan dharma artha kamanam stityam swam lokavartinam asya shastrasya tatvagyo bhavatyeva jitendriya. He says that someone who understands the essence of this Kama Sutra, and Raksha means to protect, Raksha, dharma, artha, they protect dharma, artha, kama, lust, by stitim swam lokavartinam. By lokavartinam means their dealings in society. That person is going to become jitendriya. He's going to become a master of his senses. In other words, this is the purpose of Kama Sutra. But people have gotten it all wrong. Now, to come back to the point you both of you have made a few times, then what has this got to do with us? Karunavatar, you're asking, so if somebody wants to become a devotee, does it mean maybe they should read Kama Sutra and there's some other similar literatures, or come and study some of the sculptures at Konark and whatever? Because, hey, we should just be honest, right? I should just be who I am. It reminds me of another subject, and this is my own personal take on this right now. First of all, let's put it in this particular box. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he said that we can understand the fruit of something by the we can understand something by the fruit that it gives. Phalina parichate. So I want to look at the fruit of this Rathayatra Katha. I want to look at the fruit of these erotic sculptures on the temple in Konark, and let's do it through the perspective of Caitanya Charitamrita, a verse which Kaviraj Goswami quotes from Padma Purana, which is also quoted by Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha. Vyamohaya chara charas jagatas te te puranagamas tam tam eva hi devatam paramikam jalpantu kalpavadi siddhante puna eka eva Bhagavan Vishnu Samastragama Vyapareshu Vivechena Vatikaram Niteshu Nischiyate. Before I get into explaining this verse a little bit, I read a lot of different things. We have a library. We have every Purana we can find. We have so many different types of books in it. And I remember the first time that I read the Linga Purana, I was very taken aback. It speaks about Lord Vishnu. And it says that Lord Vishnu actually doesn't exist. And Linga Purana is one of the 18 major Puranas. It says that Lord Vishnu doesn't exist. He's just a dream of Lord Shiva. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a stomach ache. You know, I didn't...
Lost. Just a moment. Thanks everyone for being with us. This is a super fascinating discussion. Madhavananda Prabhu is sharing so graciously. He'll come back.
I'm trying to look up that verse. He said it was mentioned in Tattva Sandarbha too.
No. Oh yeah.
Okay, we're back.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, you made this. Oh goodness, what was the last thing you said about this verse of
Linga Purana?
Yes,
Linga Purana. Yeah.
I'm getting a stomach ache.
Yeah, I mean, come on, we're trained. I'm just coming from the West. I don't know. I joined the Bhakta program, and everybody told me Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, and everybody accepts Krishna. And then I read in the Linga Purana that Lord, he doesn't exist. Lord Vishnu doesn't exist. And how do I deal with that? So then I came across this verse in Caitanya Charitamrita. Vyamohaya charat charasya. Vyamohaya means Vyamoha means to bewilder, to increase the illusion and ignorance. Chara charasya means of all the living entities. Chara and acharasya means who are moving and non-moving in this world. All these different Puranas are given, and all the different Agama Shastras, and they're given to help people have faith in a particular Devata. And each one of these literatures says that their particular Devata is the supreme. Right. And if you read the Linga Purana, it says that Lord Shiva, he's the best. And Lord Vishnu, he's just a dream or whatever. But the purpose is to bewilder them and to help them come a little close to real Vedic culture. So this is what I call the proximity factor. And let me give you another example of this. Prabhupada once asked the devotees, who is better, a vegetarian Christian or a worshiper of Kali who eats meat? Maybe I'm not putting exactly the way Prabhupada said it, but something like that. And the devotee said something, a vegetarian Christian. Prabhupada said, no. The worshiper of Kali, because at least he's in the Vedic tradition. And that's all that Prabhupada said that I recall. But reading through these different Puranas, even Linga Purana, there's this very crazy statement I just mentioned. But there's other statements that say things like, if you're a devotee of Lord Shiva, you should never criticize Vishnu. And Vishnu's a very great, and Vishnu's mentioned a lot. So if you read Linga Purana, you don't have faith in Vishnu. You're in a mode of ignorance, which is why you're attracted to Lord Shiva in this particular Purana. But you're reading this Purana, and you're going to be reading also names of Vishnu, maybe Krishna, which will purify you, and you'll be hearing something about them. You may even get some curiosity. Well, what does it say about him in the Vishnu Purana or the Padma Purana or the Bhagavatam? They, out of curiosity, someday they may read that thing. That's what I call the proximity factor. So I don't know. I can't claim that. I haven't seen anybody who says they know why they put these erotic sculptures on the temples. We can make another comment. They're in Shipli Shastra. When the Shastras which talk about building temples and making doors and carvings and things, they mention these erotic things that should be there, but they don't explain why. So my point is Phalina Parichate. Let's judge something by the fruit. So someone who's very lusty, the only opportunity they're going to get to hear something like this or to see something like this is to go to the Konark Temple. And they're going to go to the Konark Temple, and they're going to see this attitude is right above the animals, but above that is the demigods. And then here's Lord Suryadev, and here's Lord Jagannath. If you go to the Jagannath Mandir, the Alanath Temple in Brahmagiri also has some sexual postures on the outside. It's always embarrassing when we take devotees around. Oh my God, looking at that thing.
You're like, hello, I'm still giving class here.
Some people will be attracted by that, and we can say maybe it'll weed out the bad people. They'll stay outside. I don't look at it like that. I look at it like the proximity factor. I look at it in the same way that the reason why the Vedic literatures give the Linga Purana and the Shiva Purana is to help bring people into the ballpark of Vedic pantheon, where Vishnu is mentioned and Krishna and things, and they can get a little purified, a little interested in something higher. That by that proximity factor, they'll get something more. And so if they go to the Jagannath Temple, and these are very graphic sculptures in a very conservative society, this is their only chance to see this kind of stuff. They may indeed want to go and look. And sooner or later, they might be interested, well, what's inside? And who are the sadhus, and what do they believe in, who worship this guy who's inside, this Lord Jagannath? So there's some purpose to that, the proximity factor. With the Kama Sutra, Vatsayana Muni, he understood, Vatsayana Muni understood that there's some people who want to hear about all these sex postures and stuff. Okay, fine. So here's a book. This is the book with all the postures and stuff in it. But then he tells them, I'm a brahmachari. And the purpose of writing this book is to teach people not to give up sex life. So that's the proximity factor. It brings them in. There's some hope for everyone. So I reconciled these topics. Karuna Avatar Prabhu, several times you've asked, so we're coming from a Prabhupada background. Prabhupada said certain things, and maybe we were doing it in a cheating kind of way, or as Jai Jagannath was saying, it's kind of a schism in our brain. You know, it's not really being thoroughly honest. And so then at some point we hear about all this stuff and we think, okay, man, that's it. I'm Kama Sutra, here I come. And I've seen devotees, honestly, Hare Krishna, who go like that. And I think it's a shame. Because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says higher than the Kama Sutras are the Artha Sutras, and higher than the Artha Sutras are the Dharma Sutras. Higher than the Dharma Sutras are the Mukti Shastras, the literatures about liberation, the Upanishads, etc. And then higher than those literatures are the Bhakti Shastras. So what Srila Prabhupada has done, he's taken us from a mode of ignorance situation, a very, very bad background, and he's just tried to bring us to the topmost thing. And it's worked. It's worked in a lot of ways. As Jai Jagannath was saying, we look at personalities like Jayananda Prabhu, you know, who came from, he wasn't such a lusty person, I don't think, ever in his life, but I accept Jayananda Prabhu as an exalted Mahabhagavat, but he wasn't coming from this Indian tradition originally. So I think I see this as what Prabhupada's idea with Vanashram also, the proximity factor. Let people come and associate with devotees, but the devotees should maintain their purity. And let there be Kama Sutra. Let those things be there. That's my humble take on it.
Jai, do you have any final points? Any final questions?
I don't have any final questions. Maybe I do have a final point. I'm reminded of this article. I think it's from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, called Sri Gauranga Samaj, the Society of Sri Gauranga. I think it's a pretty famous article, and he's writing about who should be included in the Society of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And at the top of the tier are the pure devotees, But he says even people who think Mahaprabhu is just a social reformer, they are also included in the society of Lord Chaitanya. And then he goes on as far as to say that even if a person comes to a program that was arranged by devotees of Sri Chaitanya, they should also be included as part of the society of Sri Chaitanya. His only caveat is that such a society, at the helm of it, has to be the pure devotees. And so kind of what I'm hearing from you, Madhavananda, is like the proximity factor, provided there's like a pure core, then there are different, when you're going out away from that core, towards the periphery, there are different layers. But they're all having proximity to something that's very pure and wonderful and absolute beauty. And by the proximity factor, in slow degrees, they can move closer and closer to that core central. And that makes it all reconciled and very beautiful and very wonderful. And that's me reflecting. I don't know if I'm reflecting.
That's beautiful. I just want to add to that, and then we'd like to just hear some closing statements or remarks from Madhavananda Prabhu. But just what's coming together for me there, I was actually just about to ask this question, Madhavananda Prabhu. I was about to ask, like, you were saying that Srila Prabhupada genuinely had this vision and this faith that he could bring the highest thing to an asuric society, basically, and that it be genuinely received, and that people would genuinely become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead in this lifetime. That was Srila Prabhupada's faith in his mission. But then, you were mentioning someone like Jayananda Prabhu, and then I'm also just thinking of other great souls, like Vishnujan Maharaj and whoever else there may be. But then the thought that came up for me when you were mentioning their names is, these people are the exception. Like, these people are great, great souls that are genuinely on a different level. So the question that came up for me then was, can you say that what Srila Prabhupada has brought has worked in general for everyone? Has it really worked kind of like across the board? But then what clicked for me, as Jai was just reflecting now, is that actually we don't need it to work immediately for everyone, because if we have really like intelligently designed communities and structures of sadhu sangha, where these great souls who are genuinely experiencing the true essence of bhakti are kind of like able to share that with others, and where it's then gradually through the proximity factor spread out, then we've got it going on. But just the sadhu sangha element, and just really having very tight-knit communities where people have constant access to good association, that's just kind of what came together for me.
Beautiful.
At the end.
One thing that I'm walking away from all this discussion, in retrospect in my life, what I was like before, growing up in a very liberal kind of family and in America, and not following principles and things, and then coming to India and seeing all these things, is that I need to be very broad-minded.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
And I shouldn't judge people so quickly. And what to speak of judging them, I shouldn't reject them. They have some position, but as even in the Bible, I think it's in the Bible somewhere, we hate the sin and not the sinner. So we don't like certain principles, and we want to stay away from that. I would prefer to stay away from pornography. I would encourage people like that. But at the same time, some people are attracted by that, and better they do that and offer it to Krishna. That's a whole other topic, which Jiva Goswami also
our ropes to the bhakti. We need to do an episode with you on that, because I got whole sorts of questions about that.
I think Hari Parsha Prabhu speaks about that quite a bit. He may have spoke some about it. It's one of his favorite topics, I know, and he's well versed in the subject too. That we can offer things. We should offer everything to Krishna in a conscious way. I mean.
Oh man, that's okay.
Thank you. Sorry, we lost you for a second. Okay,
yeah.
I'm back.
So I don't know that Garuda is eating boga. Does he offer those kind of things? That doesn't mean someone will say, "Oh my God, you can't offer fish to Krishna." No, you can't. But At the same time, you can, it's not that Krishna is going to accept it. You can offer it, but Krishna doesn't want that. And we shouldn't offer that to our Gurudev, but we should offer everything to Krishna. And this is a culture. And I think this is, Prabhupada, you were asking about this thing, did Prabhupada's system work? I think in some ways, someone could make an argument. I don't claim to try to understand Prabhupada's mind and heart, but someone could make an argument that Prabhupada felt a little discouraged at the end based on his Vanashram talks that he gave and saying things like, they're not Vaishnavas. Because the devotee said, well, Prabhupada, we're Vaishnavas. Then Prabhupada said, you're not Vaishnavas. You're not chanting Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada wanted something even for people who are not following principles, who are eating meat and that. But you have to have the core purity there. If we don't have that, then it just becomes completely meaningless. It's such a very, very important thing. So the proximity factor may be there. We may have on the outside of the building some pornography, but Krishna has to be on the inside. And there should be some proper worship.
Right.
That's kind of that statement says everything.
It really
that's like the whole podcast in one sentence. Thank you, Prabhu.
Oh, perfect summary.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, Krishna. Prabhu, thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us your time, for sharing so graciously and enthusiastically your perspective. It was really, really an honor to meet you today, in my case, for the first time. And just in coming and sharing with everyone, I'm sure that our audience is also very grateful.
Okay, I want something from both of you guys.
Yes,
Jai Jagannath has given me a little bit before, but I want more from Jai Jagannath also. I want you guys sometime to come to Jagannath Puri. And you come take prasadam with us here.
Yes,
and we'll have some long talks in person. I like it so much better. Please.
Absolutely. If the government, stops this little overreach program that it's doing right now, I'm there for it. I'm totally there for it.
Yeah, Jai and I we're conspiring to meet in India together. Then we'll definitely visit you, Prabhu.
Jai Jagannath came for our yatra in January one year with Damodar Maharaj. He was a great contributor, kirtan and comments he made and things. You'd be also really very welcome. But what I want to start doing also, aside from our yatras, I want to have talks with people like we're doing today, online, but in person. And sometimes we have different scholars and people, even shockingly, who are outside of ISKCON, Hare Krishna, come to our ashram. And we have talks, and we do it in front of with all the devotees being there.
Beautiful.
And it's so, for me, it gives a message that we want to connect with so many people. We want to be friends with people. We want to learn from different people. It's such an important thing. I'm learning things from you guys today, and thank you so much. I really love what you're doing. This Honest Man's podcast is brilliant.
Thank you so much for your blessings. We live for that.
Hare Krishna, everybody. We appreciate your support. We'll end the broadcast now. Madhavananda Prabhu, you can just stay on just for a second. Hari Hari.